computer. Okay, we're recording. We'll probably have to click OK on that.
I'm leaving the meeting.
All right, take it away, Darrell.
All right. Hi, my name is Darrell Black of the DSB. This is Rod. And we put pictures up there so you don't get us confused for later. And for the same. Yeah. My brother from a different mother. So we were asked to do something about DMR, and I didn't know what direction, did you want basics? Did you want to know how the computers, the repeaters work? Did you want to know how the hotspots work? So we did a little everything. Okay. So I tried to mix up the slides to start pretty basic, and then we'll get a little deeper as we go. There's a lot of slides in here that I'll just give you the PowerPoint when you're done so that you can post it somewhere.
There's an echo.
Because it just gets too deep, but it's something.
Yeah,
like
there's an echo. Can you eliminate the echo?
We're getting an echo on.
Somebody mute everybody.
Your mic is on though.
Probably.
Is this one on too? Maybe that's for.
That's the camera too.
Okay.
Right, so that's probably on also.
I muted that.
Okay. Everybody can still hear me? Everybody good there?
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? The Verizon link. I'm gonna actually take one of these hotspots apart
I have one part of it.
and pass this one around because I don't care if they break it. So just so you can see what these things look like. Try not to break it. They do work. Right? There's a real one you can pass around, and then Rod has some live demonstrations later. Okay, so DMR Basics. First of all, let's talk about radio basics. The very basic is simplex, right? You can run simplex radio to radio with FM, D-Star, DMR, 4FM. Everybody understands this. And then you have the inability to talk through buildings, right? So we have repeaters. Now, repeaters nowadays are mostly FM. The DMR, D-Star, and C4FM is just a protocol on top of FM. Okay, so any FM repeater can repeat any of these protocols. So you have to understand that. It doesn't take a special repeater to make it digital. The difference is that most of the amplifiers on the output of these repeaters can't sustain that kind of power. When you go to digital, you have a higher duty cycle, and the 100-watt repeater would burn itself up at 100% duty cycle. But most repeaters that are built can repeat this protocol. So understand that, okay? When repeaters are linked together, they are usually linked, used to be linked through phone lines, and then creative hams started linking them through like UHF paths. And then IRLP came along, and All-Star came along, and now most digital modes. It doesn't matter what digital mode you have, they all have a backbone that allows you to take a repeater that's running DMR and a repeater that's running DMR and talk to each other. So if you build a repeater, you can talk to anybody else that has the same type of repeater. Okay, as long as it's connected to the internet. Because almost all of these protocols have some sort of support network behind them. And they're almost always funded by other hams. Okay, so one thing to remember is where the network doesn't work right, you can only get so many if they're not paying for it. Yes.
We're getting still a lot of backup.
Gary, yours mic is not. I'm still seeing audio coming through yours.
Oh, it said it was.
Okay.
Oh, you're the trouble.
Now it's muted. Okay, it wasn't a second ago. I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah. Okay, Mike. How are you hearing now?
Better?
Carry on, we'll see.
Okay. So when you think about different protocols, think about the fact that the protocol is only as good as far as you can talk, right? So if we're talking simplex, I can talk DMR across the room, I can talk D-Star across the room, I can talk FM across the room. When you get on repeaters, it's nothing different. But now you have a repeater connected to the internet, and that repeater can talk to others of its like type for now, okay? I don't have any of those examples because that's a whole nother subject. When the network was built, and you guys have a fusion repeater here, so you know more than most, right? That your fusion repeater can get into what, wires X rooms, I think you call it. Okay, and that's because you have a real fusion backbone. We play a little bit in fusion, but we can't get into wires X. We can only get into I forget what they're called. They're just rooms, I think. But we can't get on wires X. It's a whole different story. But all these networks have the ability to inject signals in from other sources. And when we talk about sources, we talk about this hotspot that I just passed around. That little hotspot will talk P25. Rod. Please silence your cell phone. Please silence your cell phone. Here, I'll silence mine before it goes off too. So all these little hotspots that I passed around have the ability to inject into these networks. So that little guy that I passed around, there's 3 different versions of it. That hotspot can talk C4FM. If it's an iPhone, you just throw it out the window. It'll silence it pretty good. It'll talk C4FM. That hotspot will also talk DMR. Those will talk D-Star, and they'll talk P25. Okay, and those have the capability of translating between languages. So it's something to, we'll dig deeper into those. But that allows you to take, like your club membership, put up a D-Star Fusion or DMR repeater, and then have your membership all go to Florida for the winter, right? Because that's what we do here in Michigan, is we go to Florida for the winter. Take your hotspot with you, and you're still back on your original repeater. So you're still talking to your friends, you're still checking into the same net, and it gives you the ability to stay local no matter where you're at in the country. So that's the niceties behind that. DMR itself, because that's what you guys asked me to come here and talk about. It's an open standard. However, as of now, I don't know of any amateur radio company that actually makes DMR radios for amateur radio, right? There are always commercial radios that people are using for amateur radio. Okay, they're all type, what's GMRS type, is it? Yeah, yeah, they're always.
This is a DMR radio, it's Part 90 compliant.
Yeah.
As well as same radio, so it can be used on commercial and radio.
So the radio, almost every radio out there is made for commercial, okay? You're not gonna find a DMR radio that's made for amateur radio up front. Okay, that said, the manufacturers are now starting to release firmware that's amateur only. And this has to do with the whole Bofang society, right? The FCC cracked down on the Bofang being able to transmit from 100 to 200, and then from 400 to 510, and be on FRS and GMRS. And so that when they changed the rules, it said no FRS radio, or no radio can transmit on FRS if it has a removable antenna. And no GMRS radio can ever transmit on FRS. That rule was passed in 2017. You can't manufacture a radio that can do that. That made all these radios technically illegal. So the way they got around it is they now released an amateur firmware that only transmits from 144 to 148 and 430 to 470. So they have been amateur friendly because they're selling a lot of radios to the amateur, community, so why not, right? Support them if they can do that.
Quick question. You said something standard.
Yes.
I thought there was a chip with Kodak.
No, that's only
That's a
D-Star.
different issue, yeah.
That's only D-Star. DMR does not have it's a software Kodak, but my understanding is that it's not a licensable Kodak, right? So it's something that you can just download the Kodak and use.
You can put it on a radio or whatever you.
Right. So it's not like D-Star where the Kodak has to be licensed per chip. And that's why there's less D-Star radios out there and they cost a little more. So my understanding is because there are DMR software packages for Linux that allow you to talk DMR without having to have real hardware. So, but it is an open standard. Now DMR sends a number. So Jerry keys up and says, hey, how are you doing today? And he does an ID. All I get from him is a 7-digit number. Okay, so legally, it's not Fusion, which was written around amateur radio, and it's not D-Star, which was written around amateur radio, that both have your call sign in the protocol header. Okay, so DMR just sends a number. So as amateurs, we have to treat it like FM, which means that you have to ID every 10 minutes, just like you do with an FM radio. D-Star and Fusion, it's a little bit of a gray area because people say, I don't have to ID anymore because my ID is built into my transmission, right? You don't have to ID an FT8 because it's built into your transmission. Same thinking, right? So DMR isn't that way. You have to treat it like FM and you have to ID every 10 minutes. Okay. Now, all that said, this radio here, which is a pure commercial radio, all I get across the display is your 7-digit number. Okay. But somebody in the firmware community, somebody smarter than myself at least, was able to take the Chinese menu out of the radio and use that memory space to dump what's called the DMR database. So what happens is there's a database. When you get into DMR, you go and apply for a DMR number. That's your number. So I can put that database inside the radio, and every time Jerry keys up, his 7-digit number comes along, it replaces it with your call sign.
It doesn't
Okay.
more than that.
But I mean, but it just replaces the 7-digit number with your call sign. Okay.
Which I'll demonstrate here in a minute.
Right. And that allows you to know who you're talking to, but it's still the transmission from end to end only had the number in it. So you still have to ID because only the end user knew who you were. And that's only because I had access to the database. Okay. So you have to treat it. I mean, there's a lot of hacks out there to allow these radios to install the database. But as these radios got older, this was the first radio our club bought, the SLAARC. We bought a 20-pack of these. We paid $60 a piece for them, right? And they're solid 440 radio, and they work great on DMR. And the battery lasts like, I don't know, 14 weeks without charging.
I add, to this database that Darrell's talking about. Just recently, some of the manufacturers have come out with proper alias. And what proper alias really does, you don't have to put the database in the radio anymore. It simply will decode the number as it comes through the network and add your name, location, and everything like that too.
Correct. Now, that's only supported by one of the networks, though, and we'll talk about that because I got 5 minutes later. So the database is up to 207,000 users. That means there's 207,000 hams that are using DMR. That's a pretty good number, right? They did at one time look at inactivity and purge a bunch of numbers. So this is 207,000 active hams, right? So that's the 207,000 real numbers. DMR as a network has, we call them talk groups. Your 7-digit number that is unique to you, or 6-digit, depending on how long you've been in DMR, that number is a talk group. It's your talk group. It is your number unique to you. So the public ones are 1 through 10,000. Okay, and I've got some slides on it that will explain this. We get deeper as we go. Good DMR radios will support TDMA. Everybody know what TDMA is at all? So it's time slicing, which means that, I don't know everybody's name here. I know George, so I can pick on them. Jerry and George, they want to talk on the same frequency at the same time to 2 different people. You can do that. If you're on slot 1 and you're on slot 2, you can hold 2 different conversations on the same frequency. At the same time. Because TDMA is there's a clock, GPS driven clock in every DMR radio, and it allows you to talk on the odd millisecond and him to talk on the even millisecond. And when you put it all back together, it sounds like 2 different full conversations. Each conversation is using 12.5 kilohertz.
The interesting thing is when people start getting into DMR, they were sending their radios back because they said, this radio is rated for 5 watts and only puts out 1 watt. But what they didn't take into consideration, they're transmitting in digital, which transmits every 33 milliseconds. The SWR meter can't keep up with it, so the watt meter, I shouldn't say, couldn't keep up with it. So it looks like you're not putting out any power. I can't tell you the number of radios that were returned by people that didn't understand that.
Yeah. So, yeah.
For just a second for audio. Let's try an experiment. If you'll mute your mic, I'll turn more on the camera here. I think I'll pick up both.
Okay.
See how that works.
Okay. Now we should be picking up the go ahead and speak, Darrell. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. It hates me. We'll be the first. All right.
I know how to.
Here, I'll turn the mic that way. How's this? Wait, say something.
Okay, test 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's better.
Yeah, I just turned the laptop around.
It was muddy.
So, well, he is muddy. Rod and I have been friends for a while. So, now good DMR radios support TDMA. Now, here's the gotcha. Every DMR radio, when you put it on simplex, will not do TDMA. And this is a fact that most people don't understand. When you talk DMR, it's always 25 kilohertz wide on simplex, and it's never time sliced. So you can't share a simplex frequency. Okay, you can only share a duplex frequency. So when you're on a repeater, all these radios switch to 12.5 kilohertz, and they only use one of the even or the odd, depending on what you have it set up for inside the radio. So every repeater can have 2 conversations going at the same time. Our repeater, our mixed mode repeater, that's DMR D-Star, it is almost always transmitting on both slots. One of them's tied to the 6.8 permanently, or used to be, and the other one is tied to what we call our back channel or blue zone. And you can hold 2 fully isolated conversations from each other. And it makes it a very efficient way to put up, 1 antenna, 1 repeater, and get away with having, a net on one channel and making fun of the net controller on the other channel. So not like we would ever do that or anything. So amateur repeaters are configured for 2 slots, not 1 large slot. Okay, this allows for great audio, but not good audio, but not great audio on 2 different conversations simultaneously. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
No.
All DMR radios support FM. I don't know of any DMR radios that won't go to FM. So if you invest the $60 in one, you can always use it on your FM repeater, right? So that's the nice side of it. Most DMR radios will not do simplex TDMA. We talked about that. I'm ahead of my slides, a couple of comments. Almost all DMR radios don't have a VFO, which will drive you nuts if you've never used one before. There's no way to just type in a frequency.
It is on this one.
Yeah, I know, but most people won't have this one, right? So the standard DMR radios that everybody's going to buy won't have a VFO. You need They're only really PC programmable. Okay, so you have to dump what's called a code plug, which has all your frequencies in it and all your talk groups in it. So it's something to get used to. Two different brands. So the Anytone and the BTEC that we have are both front panel programmable.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of
I've
that one, so-
heard of them.
Yeah, waterproof's always good because you always want to talk when you're in the shower. We used to have a guy that every Saturday morning would get on while he was in the shower. Not on the DMR side, but on the FM side. It's like, what? Can't you just wait 5 minutes and take a shower? I don't know. He's not around anymore. I don't know why. So when we talk about backbones, we talked about, you know, your HTs talking to each other or talking to a repeater. The repeaters usually go somewhere, right? Because if you're going to get into digital, you're not going to keep it local. You're going to talk somewhere. There's networks behind the scenes that you can talk to. One of them is the DMR Mark. Okay. This is the very first network that was in the country. It is supported and built by Motorola employees. They're very, what's the word? If you're not a Motorola radio, they don't want you on their network. Yeah, let's go with that. So they actually build something called C bridges, which are gateway bridges that you can put on your repeater to connect to the internet to talk to other repeaters. C bridges won't allow radios to pass if they don't have MAC addresses registered with them. So they can lock out your radio from their network. So they make sure that, you know, there is a MARC network in Michigan, but you have to actually go to them and give them the MAC address of your Motorola radio and tell them, hey, this is a radio, I need a public key. They generate a key, you store it back in the radio, and then you can get on their network. The hotspots will connect to them, but
No, you can go directly into them now. If you register on their network with your call,
yeah,
it doesn't matter what radio you have anymore.
but they're rigid, right? They don't like the Chinese radios on there. Originally, it was built by Motorola only employees, and then it said Motorola only radios, and then it, you know, maybe they're lightening up a little bit because they don't have really the content or the user group, because not everybody owns a Motorola radio at $800 a crack, right? But DMR Mark is there. Brandmeister is the most popular. Brandmeister is a worldwide network. In the States, I think we have 5 servers. We were up to 8, and then we kind of we lost 3 along the way, but I think we have 5 left. Backbone servers, but there's servers in almost every country. There's 180 or more servers around the world, and it's a good network. That's the one we're on. It has its flaws, but for the most part, it's been solid. And we as a whole club got kicked off once. We got banned from it. And it took a while to say our sorry and, you know, get back into their good graces.
What did you do?
We connected our repeater to the network and made it look like a hotspot. And they said, well, you're a repeater. You should be coming in through the backbone, which means you need to register with us and ask for permission. And we said, well, we're just a hotspot, and we're connecting up a whole user group. And they just they took the whole set of DMR numbers and banned us until we said we were sorry and did it right. Yeah. So, you know, but that stuff happens. Now, Brandmeister is the one that allows hotspots. These hotspots were all built around the Brandmeister network. They work other places, but all these little DMR hotspots that I passed around were built with Brandmeister in mind. So they have all the technical ability to connect to them. Brandmeister now requires you to have a password as a checksum. They didn't do it, but here's a scenario. I drive past Rod's house, right, with my radio. and I talk on his hotspot, it'll say W8DSB or my DMR ID, but somewhere embedded in that header is his DMR ID. So if I'm causing malicious interference, he has no control over my use of his repeater. So they forced all the hotspots to be what's called private hotspots. They want you to run in private mode, so only your call sign will pass through it. Well, then people that wanted to maliciously interfere, I would just change my hotspot to have his call sign in it, right? And then I could use my radio with his call sign and my hotspot with his call sign, and I could get on the network and I could interfere and he would get blamed. So they went one step farther and said, well, your Brandmeister account, inside there it says you have to register your hotspot, and you go in and say, I have this hotspot and I want to use this password with it. And then in the hotspot, you have to go in and put a password in it. When they match, then it can log in. So I can no longer take my hotspot, put his password, his call sign in it, and use it. So this kind of cleaned up any of the malicious interference. Because of course, if hams get bored, what do? Right? They cause issues. You ever go down to Dayton on Friday night? RG8U is the most popular call sign on the Darrell repeater. Okay, so it happens, right? You get a bunch of hams together and they just cause problems. So so there's a little bit of security that was built into Brandmeister, and all these hotspots support that. Okay, DMR Plus. I don't know if that network's still in existence.
It is, but it's very underutilized.
It was a DMR Mark supported network, but it allowed you to use USB connected dongles. So if you remember before, I don't know if you do or not, but before these hotspots were hotspots, they used to use USB ones. You plugged it in, it was a little radio, and you could talk to your radio and get into the network. Most of those have been locked out of all the systems. Okay. The difference is these hotspots have what's called, and get a little geekish here, they do forward packet correcting. So if you're noisy into your hotspot, the hotspot will actually fix your communications. So it'll take a guess at what you just said digitally, and it'll fix the communication before it sends it to the network. So you never have any static on your communication, and it'll either be completely there or drop out, right? But it's got all this forward correcting stuff that the dongles didn't have. So a dongle allowed you to get on a digital network, but be staticky. So they locked them all out. All the networks did. And when they did that, I believe DMR Plus went bye-bye. You know, it's still referenced, but I don't think it's used anymore. Okay. There are many private networks. You can build a South Lyon network. It's easy to do. This radio for $60 is SDR. Somebody in the Smartland took the guts of this radio, they downloaded it and made it a Linux module. You can take this radio and put it up in the cloud, like in an Amazon cloud, and you can connect all your hotspots together and you can build a network and not talk to anybody else. Okay, we have that in our club. So the SLAARC has an MD380 emulator running in on a Pi that we pay for. It's, I don't know, $15 a year, and it's in the cloud. And all our hotspots connect to it. And one of the connections is actually back to our repeater. But if the repeater disappeared, all of us on the hotspots would never notice, right? If we stopped coming out RF, nobody would notice. But you could still drive around the country and talk to each other. So, and there's a lot of private networks like that. There's one up north called MI5. Anybody know Fred? What is it? W8 FSM, I think is his call. He's got he works somehow or another. He works with the state, right? So his company builds all the MSPS for the digital police radios, and on those towers, he's allowed so much experimental bandwidth. So they've got a whole DMR network. So every police tower has got a ham antenna on it, and they can connect to each other, and you can use it. The instructions and the rules for his network are up on the MI5 network, They only allow so many talk groups because they want to keep it for emergency backbone, but it's all microwave connected. So if the internet goes down and the power would go out, all those towers are diesel generated, backed up, and they're microwave connected, they would still work. So even though we don't use them that often, every one of my DMR radios has his channels in it. So if, you know, poop hits the fan someday, you can go to an MI5 network, it should work. So it's something you should have in your radio set. Yeah. I think so.
That's called
Yeah.
Could you
Salem.
repeat the question? The questions on
Oh, is it the same as the Siemens network? I think so. And
It's
there's
called the Central.
a Central Michigan Emergency Network, MI5 and MI7. I believe they're all the same group doing the same thing. So I don't know where the different names come from. Yeah, I don't know that.
They also carry the statewide 1 and statewide 2 on the network too. So there's 2 different, well, actually there's 3 different networks in the state of Michigan for different parts of the state. And so you can, they will carry that on their network too.
Right. So we'll get to that. I got some talk groups for this. The other real popular network, I Googled it to see what DMR networks are popular today. The next one is the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio Club. They've got systems all the way up and down the Rockies, from Vegas all the way down to Tempe. And I believe that they go into California, but it's hundreds of repeaters, and they're all on one DMR network. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So they're not as big, but they're doing the same thing, right? So we were kind of involved with them for a little bit. They just kind of popped out of nowhere and started doing, you know, some good. And so they have a whole bunch of interconnected repeaters too. So you don't have to, my point here is that you don't have to become like affiliated with Mark or Brandmeister or any of that. You could put up a DMR repeater and just have everybody connect to it. The thing is, most repeaters are on water towers, okay, or in government buildings where you can't have incoming internet connections, right? So you have to have the repeater connect to a cloud where everybody can connect to it. So the repeater is just one of the bubbles, just like your all-star nodes. It's just one of the bubbles off the hub, but it's not the hub, right? If you do it with DMR, it's the same scenario. You can't have incoming to the repeater because it's behind a cell phone router or something that doesn't allow incoming ports. So, or it doesn't have the bandwidth to support 30 people in a club. So you want to put the hub in a cloud and then have everybody connect to that. So your bubbles kind of offset a little bit, right? Somebody that's got a lot of bandwidth. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, is it possible to be on more than one network simultaneously? Yes, it is. It gets complicated. It gets complicated, but it can be. So Rod and I have been experimenting with this. We're 5 years into this, and we still haven't figured everything out. So anywhere but experts, right? But we're on our LARC network for 2 talk groups. The LARC, we have 2 repeaters that are registered from the worldwide database, so 2 different talk groups. And then we decided that our cloud would carry those 2 talk groups. So all the hotspots from our members connect to that hub, but we also connect to Brandmeister. So anybody on Brandmeister could hear those 2 talk groups. But if Brandmeister disappeared, the club and most of the connections would still be in place, right? It's only anybody that was connected to Brandmeister to jump in would be disconnected. But at the same time, let's say you want to go to a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th talk group that's not listed, the hotspot can be taught to, okay, these aren't 2 preferred talk groups. We're going to switch networks and we're going to route it to a different network. So, for example, there's a network called a talk group called 91, which is a worldwide talk group on Brandmeister. Rod's on it all the time. You can hear him chatting all day long, right? So if you're not on one of our talk groups, if I turn my radio on to 91 and key up, the hotspot will route 91 out a different network. But when I unkey, I can hear 91 coming in, but I can still hear my two talk groups coming in. So they'll overlay the audio on top of the radio, but you got to tell which one you're talking on. I can talk on 91, but I can still hear 310.185 coming through. Yes. So you don't have to be promiscuous because well, yes, you do. You have to be promiscuous because the radio will filter out the talk groups you don't want to hear. So if you're in promiscuous mode, which allows you to hear everything, then the filter is the hotspot. So the hotspot would still have 310.195 transmitting and 91 transmitting, so you would hear both, right? But you have to know which one's going to key, right? And that's whichever one's in your talk group label for going out. So I know that gets a little complicated, but yes, it can be done. And we're playing with it now because we do it on our multi-mode repeater, where if somebody comes in and they're on 310.185, we route them to our 6.8 repeater. If they come in on 311.887, we route them to our D-Star translator. If they come in on 91, we route them to Brandmeister. Okay, or any of the other talk groups, the other million, right? Yeah. Yes.
This is all brand new to me, so I'm trying to kind of catch the concept here. So the talk group, if I key on a talk group,
Yes.
everybody hears me on that talk group.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the network is what hosts the talk group.
Correct.
So like the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio, if they've got 100 repeaters from north to south, if I'm on a talk group, anybody on that whole system of repeaters can access their local RF link and participate on that talk group.
Correct.
But that conversation is not coming out of everywhere. You have to be.
It's probably coming out of everywhere.
But you have to be subscribed to that talk group.
No.
If I'm listening to some random repeater. Anyway, do I also hear whatever's going on in any talk group?
It depends on how their repeaters are configured. If they're configured to stay connected statically, then my guess is, because I just Googled this a couple days ago, my guess is that Rocky Mountain Amateur Radio Club has 1 or 2 talk groups, right? One for slot 1, one for slot 2. And my guess is all their repeaters are connected to that same talk group in every one of them. And it was put together for people that are hiking across the Rocky Mountains from, the 5-hour drive, which is what, about, 10 days of hiking. And you get on these 100 repeaters along the way. It's probably going to be the same talk group all the way along in the same slot from one end to the other. Now, if they're dynamic, that means the repeater is not going to transmit unless you're on it, right? So when you walk up to a repeater and key up your radio, the repeater then will connect to that talk group and it'll stay connected for X number of minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is. And then it'll time out and it'll disconnect again. And then anybody talking on that talk group won't come back out the repeater because nobody on the repeater side is using it. So just like your water tower repeater here, if you connected to 91, you would listen to, everybody here would hear the worldwide conversation. But if nobody on this end talked, in 15 minutes, it would kick you back off. Somebody would have to chunk it and then reconnect it again, right? Because there's a timer on Brandmeister that says, if a repeater connects to me and nobody uses it, is it 10 minutes or 15? 15, it will kick you back off of it because they don't want 1,000 repeaters connected just listening all day. Because it really puts a load on their network to be able to, even though it's UDP, it puts a fairly big load on that network. So they don't want people just hovering over it, listening like a scanner all day. So you have to be engaged in the conversation, or else your local repeater would disconnect from that talk group. Now, because that's a club, right? A funded club, they're probably static, which means they're always connected. But I don't know because I haven't been involved with them. But my guess is that nobody's going to use the repeaters locally, right? They're all going to be connected. But if you wanted to disconnect one and have a local conversation, you just key up your radio and hit the disconnect button. And then it's off the network and then you can use it locally. So it's all depends on configuration. The repeater owner can set it up any way they want. Okay.
There's a lot to really embrace with any of the digital modes, and DMR is especially complex, but boy, it's really rewarding once you get the fundamentals down. There's so much you can do with it.
So talk groups are like traffic lanes. You can only use one at a time. Forget about promiscuous right now, which we talked about. Talk groups can only be used one at a time. Okay. But you can switch lanes anytime you want. Just turn on your turn signal, right? So what I mean by that is, if you look at my graph here, the bottom one is talk group 1, and the very top group is 5,559,742, and anything in between. That was the two as of 2 days ago, the two extreme ends in talk groups. Okay. When we registered our first repeater, we got 310.195. And we've been using 310.195 as the basis for our club for 5 years. When we registered the second repeater, it was 311.887. And we use that one now for what, about 3 years, 2.5 maybe. So, but everything in between, everything below 10,000 is more of a public talk group. Everything above 10,000 is more of a private talk group. No such thing as privacy, but they treat them differently. And I'll explain this as we go forward. Say we take a repeater and they're both connected to a talk group. I use ours because it's an easy number to remember, 310.195. These two repeaters are connected to that talk group. So are all these hotspots you can see. So every hotspot around the country and the two repeaters are all on that talk group. So if Jerry keys up on a hotspot in Florida and Rod's in California on a different hotspot, he's going to be able to talk back and forth because you're both on the same talk group. Okay, so it's that simple. Now, these two hotspots, you can see there's two of them that are on TAC 310. The TAC channels were put in there as like CB channels. Hey, I want to talk to somebody on a repeater. Let's say I go to 91 and I start talking to somebody in South Korea and the conversation gets long. You move off to a TAC channel so that you don't tie up the worldwide channel with your conversation about, fishing, right? So there's TAC 310 through 319. You pick a channel, say, hey, meet me on TAC 310. Everybody knows what that means. It's actually talk group 310. Okay, meet me on TAC 319. It's talk group 319. A bunch of zeros in front of it because they're all the same amount of spaces, right? So you're expected to move off if you're on a wide area network and your conversation's too long. So you move off to one of the TAC channels, okay? TAC channels you can stay on indefinitely as long as you keep the conversation going. Once your conversation ends, the TAC server will kick you off your hotspot. It'll get disconnected automatically in about 15 minutes, okay? People used to treat TAC 310 as channel 19 on the CB. Everybody just monitored it all day long, every day. And they had over 100,000 users at any one time monitoring it. So they put a timer on it because it was crashing the network. Okay, they said, no more of this. Everybody's got to break up, split up, go your own ways. Because that became the end all for DMR. Okay, so this makes sense to people? Now, I just changed one of the repeaters to TAC 310. So now the two hotspots and the one repeater is on 310. The other repeater is still talking on 310.195. Okay. Now we get into dual slots. That first repeater, slot 1 is on TAC 310 and slot 2 is on 310.195. So you can have two people talking, one of them talking to these hotspots and the other one talking to the other hotspots. Okay. Now, generic hotspot or generic talk groups, they're broken up from, like I said, from 1 through 10,000, but these are the talk groups that most people are interested in. And they're the states. Like Michigan is 3126. We happen to be the 26th state to join the union. They followed the same rules that most of the people use as the union entry numbers. Okay, I used to be a CBer way back in the day, and we used to be 26 FS group, friendly sidebanders. And there used to be this club across the whole country, and we were also 26 then. You know. So if you want to talk to anybody in Michigan, get on 3126. Okay. On top of this, Michigan's actually two different regions. The people on the West Coast don't like the people on the East Coast. I don't know if you noticed this or not, but the IRLP people that are on the, going up the west side of the state, they don't really interact with the people on this side of the state because there's a mountain range in between. Not much of one, but you don't actually, once you get past Grand Rapids, it's hard to talk to Muskegon because you're going up and over a mountain. So they've always had their own repeater network, the IRLP repeater network. Well, when that happened, they actually split the state. They said, hey, we need a statewide 1 and a statewide 2 group. So 3126-1 became statewide 1. 31262 became statewide 2. Okay. Some of these other states have statewide 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, like Vermont, 3150. They have a 3151, 52, 53, 54, 55, because they grab those to be part of their statewide 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. It was just easy to remember because you already remembered the base statewide. You just added a 1 through whatever number behind it. We actually have a statewide 3. It's just not advertised, right? Nobody uses it. It hasn't ever been published, but the group grabbed it so that if you needed to have a third statewide, you would have a 3126-3. So there's logic behind these talk groups. But this is the standard base of talk groups that everybody uses. They also did a region 1 and a region 2 and a Midwest states and a complete United States. And there's a whole bunch of just different demographics that break up into other numbers. Okay. Now repeaters, if you wanted to put up a DMR repeater and you wanted to do it 100% right and money was no object, this is the repeater you buy. The MTR 3000. It is built to be a DMR repeater by Motorola. There is no better. Okay. Most people can't afford that. Okay. This is the second best, an XPR 8300. We have one of these. It's all burned up. Somebody gave it to us and said, it got hit by lightning. You want it? So they haven't done anything with it. It's been sitting there for years. So, some things to think about, right? This was our first repeater. We bought a Bridgecom. Bridgecom advertises repeaters, right? Now, it turns out that when we invested in this, we didn't know a lot about DMR yet. We didn't know a lot about anything yet, right? But what we found was that this is nothing more than an FM repeater. It's a 40-watt FM repeater. You take the cover off, it's got two 40-watt mobiles in it. One's in receive and one's in transmit, okay? And we were warned by a bunch of people on the internet that if you run it at 40 watts, it'll burn itself up in DMR mode. And it did. Okay, we burned it up, about 9 months into it. Now, what we learned from this experience, though, is this guy right here. This in front of the camera. This is the interface that was made by Kevin. Steve knows them, NADR. But this guy makes a bunch of audio interfaces and stuff. Well, he makes this interface for Bridgecom. That interface has got a Pi hat and a radio interface on top of it.
Nothing more than one of these.
It's nothing more than a hotspot, but it's configured to interface with repeaters. Instead of it have a transmitter and receiver like these little hotspots do, it's just an audio card, like a Sherry, or not a Sherry, but like a Dyna, okay? Or if you guys are familiar, I don't know if Steve showed you the Pulse that we had him build. It's nothing more than that, but it's supported out of the box by PyStar, which is the software that all these run. Okay, so it's expensive, but it works, right? But you can make any repeater DMR using that box. So that's it right there. I've got a picture of it close up. So it becomes a PyStar repeater controller, and you can use that, and you can interface any repeater that is FM with it and make it DMR, D-Star, or Fusion. Now, Kevin won't sell them to us anymore. He used to sell them over the counter, but now I think he signed an exclusive contract with Bridgecom. So you got to buy them through Bridgecom. They're about $425. But that comes with the Pi. So, you know, you're about $50 offset there, right? But it's a complete controller. I mean, if you look at some of the controllers you bought over the years, RC, you know, 85s, they were what, $1,000 or more. It's just a controller, right? But it works. So this was our second DMR repeater that we built. This is an MTR 2000. Down in the left-hand corner, you can see the interface, and I had to wire it in, my workbench where I wired it in, the PyStar running, and then the calibration in the bottom right. The software comes with a routine that you run called PyStar calibration or cal or something like that. You run it and it gives you a single tone, and it gives you instructions on how to shift the frequency back and forth so that you're right on frequency. So I had to use a DMR receiver. I just use an RTL dongle. So I built a $9 receiver, right? So I was able to calibrate the output of the repeater. We then took the repeater, put it up on our version of your water tower, and it's running. It's been running for a couple of years. We moved it here recently to a different area, but it's still running. You know, other than moving it, it's just been solid. Yeah. So so the MTR.
The question for the Zoom.
Okay, so the question was, how does it resolve burning out the transmitter? The MTR 2000 is a Motorola-based repeater. It's been around since the 70s. It was made to be a pager transmitter when it was first built. So it's a 100-watt continuous duty digital transmitter, right? All day, all night, every day, key up, never on key. So we're lucky enough that our founders of our club have been gathering MTR 2000s for a while. We literally have 12 of them sitting in stock, all parts to build more and more. None of them work, but we keep borrowing parts from each other and building them, right? The 6.8 is running on one of these. Our 440, our two 440 machines, our mixed mode repeater, and our snapper repeater are all MTR 2000s. But over time, something fails. A power supply goes, a receiver goes, but we got enough of these here that we can mix and match. And we've never been able to, knock on wood, keep all 5 or 6 of these running. But these are just very solid repeaters. That doesn't mean you have to use these. I know you guys are still using GE Master Pros, I believe. Is what you got up there now, I think.
My core.
But if it's a good FM repeater, you can put an interface on it, make it digital. Okay, there's nothing behind it that's stopping you. So we've had good luck with what we're using, but it's not the end all. We just found that the Bridgecom, if you wanted to use it, you have to run it at a lower power and put an amplifier in front of it. And then you need an amplifier rated for digital, right? A continuous duty amplifier, like a TPL or something like that, something that's made for that.
Yeah, that's one thing with DMR, specific DMR, is you can't just use any amplifier. It has to be a very fast switching amplifier because of the TDMA nature of it.
I was under the impression that we couldn't use just any finals for the same amplifier because you wouldn't get the right phase and the right frequencies tight enough for DMR receivers to pick it up.
So
Is that not the case, or is that rumor?
I think that's a rumor. I mean, we're just using an off-the-shelf FM repeater that was built way before any of this digital was ever thought about. And you can see that's a solid, that pattern will sit there all day long. It never wavered, it never moved. And it just worked. Now, that said, maybe there's some out there that aren't as stable, but we haven't run into any yet because we still have our Bridgecom. It was repaired and I have it back. I can get that running on DMR. We have 2 fusion machines, the DX1s, and I turned one of those into a DMR repeater just because I wanted to, right? And then we made a bunch of these. So I haven't run into one yet that I haven't been able to make into the DMR. Now, the D-Star and the Fusion is easier. DMR is the hardest because it's harder to tune the calibration. If DMR works, all the other modes work. It's the hardest one to calibrate. And once you get that working, everything else kind of falls in. I don't know. When you get these hotspots, they give you an offset based on the oscillator chip that's on them. There's a crystal and an oscillator that's on each hotspot. And they tell you how far off a frequency they are. So if I type in a simple frequency like 434.000, on the board, it'll say minus 475. So in the software, you put in minus 475, that's 475 Hertz. So it'll offset the transmitter by 475 Hertz so that you're on with your radio. You're correcting for the crystal.
That's only on the Chinese built hats. There's American built hats, a little bit more money, well, actually quite a bit more money, that use a Texas Instrument chip in the right rock.
Yeah, they're 0. Okay.
I got 2 of them. I got that, and I got some of the Chinese ones.
Now, this repeater, as good as it is, it's still at a minus 200. Okay. So well, compared to the hotspots, no, because most of the hotspots are close to minus 500. So, except for like Rod said, the one that's double-ended there that he has, that's the expensive one, right? Instead of being an $11 hotspot, it's a $110 hotspot. But the money comes in with a stabilized crystal, a heated crystal, all the stuff that's around the oscillator to make it more stable. And you get a 0 offset, right? But once you get the offset on a Chinese one right, they shouldn't drift. They're typically solid, right? The problem is you can tune a hotspot for a radio, but let's say the radio's off frequency, just a hair. So now you have to tweak the hotspot to make up for the radio, and then you pick up a second radio that was on frequency and it doesn't work, right? So you have to decide which radio do you want to use on that hotspot, because maybe the cheap radios are off and they're not on either. So the hat might be off 475 Hertz, but the radio might be off another 50, or the other radio's not off.
The problem is pretty much gone away with a lot of movie radios.
Yeah. We run into them a lot with these MD380s, where you could take 4 of them and only 3 of them would work on any one hotspot. It is a much bigger issue, and we thought we were going to have a huge issue, right? But the repeater, you can open up the receiver 30 kilohertz wide, and it seems to have fixed itself. Because the Motorola repeater, you're only transmitting on a repeater at 12.5, overall 25, but the repeater has the ability to receive 30. So we open it up wider, and it doesn't seem to matter where the radio is, it seems to just work. So I think we kind of got lucky just because of the repeater we used. But so far we haven't run into it. We do get some people that come in digital, but we always blame it on single strength. So, it happens. Hotspots, these are I don't know how long you want this to go, because we can go long, we can go short. So if I'm, yeah, I just don't want, I didn't know how long you planned on this, so. Okay, well, we won't go, I'll turn it over to Rod here shortly, okay? MyCore, okay. Steve would know. So hotspots have different flavors too, okay? And if you're building a repeater, you don't need hotspots, right? We just found that no matter how good our repeater is, there's always somebody driving away. Like I drive to Plymouth every day, so I got a hotspot in my truck, because at some point you're going to drive out of your footprint and you don't want to lose your friends. So, I switch over to my hotspot frequency when I get halfway to work every day. They come in different flavors. What you see here, let's see, can I design?
How do you use a hotspot in your truck?
So this gets very complicated, but it can be easy. You can take all these hotspots are pies, so they all have Wi-Fi. You can connect up to your cell phone, call it done. Okay. Rod and I have gone the next step. We have dedicated hotspots in our vehicles. He has an industrial hotspot. I have a Netgear small business router that's glued onto my back window. And then it doesn't have any Wi-Fi in it. It has an Ethernet port that I go down to a 5-port switch, and then I go to 4 pies. One for DMR, one for D-Star, one for Fusion, and one for All-Star. So I flip a switch, they all boot up, and they all connect to wherever I have them self-programmed to connect to. So I can drive anywhere in the country and never lose connectivity with home.
That router is connected to your cell phone?
No, that router is a cell phone.
Oh.
So it's $10 a month for a SIM card from most companies. And then you just got your full-time, connectivity in your vehicle. A DMR hotspot. Yes. Yeah. I don't use a jetpack, but same thing, right? I was trying to put a mouse over there, but I can't. So the bottom left, you can see these are what we call simplex hotspots. That's what I passed around. Yeah. The middle one is a duplex hotspot. The ones that have the clear cases, they were, C4 Labs came out with a case early on when hotspots became very popular. Their claim was that all these hotspots come in metal boxes. It's going to reduce your Wi-Fi because you're putting the Pi inside the metal box. Your Wi-Fi connection won't be as good, and you won't be able to connect to things far away. So you need to change to their clear case, and everybody did. But then when you transmit, the RF gets back into the Pi and it reboots them. So they didn't work out all the time. Sometimes they were fine. Sometimes the RF actually interfered with the Pi and top hat communications. So we pretty much all went back to the metal cases. Now, Rod's got a clear case on one of his, but he's also got a high-end hotspot, right? That high-end hotspot doesn't seem to get interference.
I have one in the metal case too. It doesn't interfere at all either.
Yeah, but that was the theory behind the metal case. Is they said, oh, these metal cases are nice. They came free with every hotspot you bought. Our club bought 40 hotspots, and then we bought another 30 of the duplex ones later. So we did 2 big builds over the last 5 years. And during those builds, it's like we were concerned about cases. Well, they all came for free, so we weren't concerned anymore. But then there was this theory that, oh, we can only talk 10 feet or 15 feet with a Wi-Fi connection. Well, it turns out that wasn't the case. They worked pretty far, and you really didn't want to be that far away from your Wi-Fi source anyways, because the farther away you are, the worse the connection was with or without a case, right? So a good clean Wi-Fi signal was always better anyways. So lots of flavors. When you get these, and I passed around a kit that was the way it came. When you get these, you got to solder the header onto them. The board comes with the hotspot comes with the header. The Pi 0 does not. They come with the other end of the header. You got to solder them onto your Pi 0 separately. So if you don't know how to solder, you can order a Pi 0 WH with header, right? The W is actually for Wi-Fi. The H is for header. It costs you more money. Pi 0 at Micro Center was $5. They no longer offer the $5 special. they're 14 now. Okay. Today, I would not buy a Pi Zero. There's something called a Pi Zero 2 out. It uses a faster processor. I've got one at home already running. It works fine with the same software. He's got one running. It's a quad core processor. It's 8 or 16 times faster than a Pi Zero, but it's on a Pi Zero form factor, and it doesn't heat up at all. It's the same heat as the Pi Zero. So you solder on your header. You make sure that when you put when you put the board and you screw it to the case, people would leave the header sticking out so far that it would all the pins would touch the case, and then when you plug in power, it would just arc, and then you ordered another Pi Zero and started over. So you clip the bottom of them. You put a little piece of tape in the bottom just for, peace of mind. You screw in the board. You put a little space. This is the actual top hat. You screw the top hat on, and then you put the cover on. That happens to be the hotspot that doesn't match that one, but that's okay. Slides got mixed up. And then you download the software, and we're not going to go into software in this meeting, but all of these, everything DMR related is written around a piece of software called PiStar. Okay, PiStar is the backbone for all the DMR repeaters, is the backbone for all the DMR hotspots. It has a dashboard that's really nice to watch as people talk back and forth. You can watch them. Oh, okay. So you'll have a dashboard that's live. You can watch them talk back and forth. You can watch what's called the burr rate. If your burr rate's off, you know that minus 475, you have to adjust it. Yeah, bit error rate, sorry. So you can adjust all this, but everything here is how to set up your PiStar. Okay, I've got every slide step by step, go through each one. I don't want to waste your time here. Okay, but it tells you how to set it up. We've done over 70 of these builds. If you follow these slides step by step, you can build your own. Okay, you guys have a 50-50 today at all? Because that one that I brought, that one in a package, yeah, if you want to auction that off and raise some money for your club, you can do that, or do it at your next meeting. Take it with you. So it's a gimme.
You don't have to build them. You can buy them all put together. Or whatever.
Yeah, they're just stupid expensive. So I bought those, the 3 that I passed around. Okay, the one that's in the blue box that's glued shut, I just took the antenna connector off and put a 50 ohm resistor, a 1/4 watt resistor. These only do a 10 milliwatts. So I took a 1/4 watt resistor and just soldered it on there and then glued the case shut. And I take that to hotel rooms with me, and I can use it around hotel rooms. I bought every one of those boards for $11 a piece and built my own. So you got a $5 Pi Zero and an $11 board. That $11 board on eBay today costs about $25 because of all the tariffs and the arguing and politics. So it costs you more, but you can build them. You can still build a hotspot for $45 total. You can't buy one for $45. If you go to eBay and buy a new one built, it's $110 all day long. Okay, so I gave you the instructions on how to build them. Okay, now there are 2 different kinds that, like Rod held up, the simplex and the duplex. The duplex ones, if you're going to build one on a duplex board, please use a Pi Zero 2. Because the Pi Zeros, Rod has not had any problems, but a bunch of our members have. When you're talking back and forth, there's a lot of packets that are lagging. And when it's trying to correct them on the end, if you start to talk before the last packet comes in, you won't key the radio and it won't go out. So you'll be talking, but you're not transmitting, right? So the Pi Zero doesn't have enough horsepower to turn the conversation around snappy. So the Pi Zero 2, not a problem. Now, if you have a good top hat, $100 top hat or more, you get away with the Pi Zero. But anything you're going to build today, I'd say use a 2. Just put a 2 underneath it.
The regular 5 is going away.
Yeah, it's not. The Pi 02 is only $14. You can buy them from Micro Center. Build a hotspot off of one of those. You can get into your Fusion. You can't get into Wires X because Wires X is proprietary for the Fusion or for the Yaesu box, that little interface box. That is a different codec, and that's licensed to Yaesu only, and they won't allow it in the hotspots. So you can't get into a Wires X room, but you can get into Fusion rooms all across the country. There's thousands of them that are not Wires X, and these will do it. That's why I said when you guys built your repeater, if you would have built one that wasn't Wires X, we could connect to you, once in a while digitally, but we can't because we can't do Wires X on our end. So,
None of us do wire X.
no, well, you have it.
Actually, we don't. The wires X connection is at my house, and it's been down for 3 weeks now, and I have got super call.
Well, we lost a repeater for a whole day and never knew it because we're all on digital talking to each other, right? So, I mean, it happens. Real quick about radios. When you program a radio, there's 4 steps that you got to remember, okay? First thing is you got to tell it who you are. So your call sign and your DMR ID, number 1, okay? Number 2, you got to put in the talk groups you want to use. Talk groups have to go into the what's called the code plug first. So you put in the talk groups that you're going to use. Now, there are programs out there that will import them all. So there's something called Contact Manager that will help you bring in all 207,000 of them if you'd like. So you just get good with software, right? But if you're just going to use, like, we just use 2. I use 2 all day long. Rod uses maybe 3 or 4. But you just put in the talk groups you want to use, okay? Then you put in the frequency of either your repeater or your hotspot or both, and then you connect that to the talk group. So you say, I want to go to the repeater, I want to go to slot 1, and I want to put it on this talk group. I want to go to the repeater, I'm going to go to slot 2 and put it on this talk group. And that's what you end up with, is something that looks like this, okay? And then the 4th thing you do is you add those talk groups to a zone. DMR is about zones. So you can have a zone called hotspots and only the hotspot frequencies show up. And you can have a zone called Livingston that only the Livingston repeaters show up. You can have one called South Lyon that only your repeaters show up, so you can make groups, and channels can be in multiple zones. Like I got zones, say water department, where I can go to that zone and just hit scan and it'll scan all the water department stuff, because they happen to be DMR, right? So you can make any zone you want. And then it's just a group of channels. But you can't go to a channel in a DMR radio if it's not in a zone. So I can give you a code plug that's got 1,000 channels in it, but only put 2 in a zone. You can only have access to the 2. Okay. So those are the 4 things you need to do.
My understanding is that some radios, you can do all of this from the radio itself.
You can. So this radio, I can go to any zone, any channel, and then I can hit, there's a magic button on it where you hold it down and it says type in new talk group, and you can type in a talk group in Kerchunk and the radio will stay on that talk group. But it still uses the frequency that you were on from that channel you were previously on and the time slot. So, yeah. It is, absolutely. Oh. Yeah, so the question was, can you program this from the front panel? Was the first question, and the answer is some radios you can. The BTEC 6x2 that we're very familiar with, that's the one that we've had the best luck with. It is equivalent to an Anytone 868, but the firmware was written in the US. It's the same hardware as the Anytone 868. Radios are exactly the same. They just have different firmwares. You can actually download the Anytone firmware and put it in, and it'll say it's an Anytone now. With that particular radio, you can go to the front panel, and if you pick a channel that has a frequency and a time slot that you're interested in, but you want to change talk groups, you just hold the magic 0 down for 3 seconds, and then you can type in any talk group you want, key up, and it'll be on that talk group until you change any dial. It'll stay on the new talk group. So for example, you're on your hotspot and you're on 91 talking to somebody, and he says, hey, meet me on TAC 311. Hold the 0 down, type in 311, kerchunk, you're on 311 now. That fast, right? You don't have to go find 311 in your zone and your knobs. Right. And you're there.
But the point I'm
Yeah.
that you want to, so that they can get on the thing, is that the best way to do this is with a PC with the program to do code runs.
Yes, the best way to program any DMR radio is through the DMR code plug software that was made for that radio. The power behind the software is much greater than any front panel programming. And it allows you to do things like import and export channels between radios, import and export talk groups. There is a procedure where you can go to, it's called radio ID, yeah, thank you, radioid.net. And you can download the whole entire database, put it on your computer as a CSV file, take that CSV file and import it into the create contact area, and then it'll bring them in as the whole 200,000 contacts. Now, typically what you do is you filter out the non-US people, and that brings it down to about 60,000, I think, right? So you just say, hey, I want to download just the US contacts, and you put those in, you can put those in your code plug, right? And then you can just put in the simple frequencies, the DMR repeaters around you, the hotspots that you're going to use, maybe the ones your friends use that you visit their houses. And the hotspot, the one thing that I will tell you is it locks out the satellite zones automatically, because everybody was using the satellite frequencies as hotspot frequencies. So Andy, the guy who writes PyStar, went out of his way to make sure he locked out those frequencies. So you can't talk on a LEO channel by mistake. Okay, but using software to program a DMR radio is the only way that you're going to get 100% satisfaction out of programming that radio. Okay, and I'm going to pass this over to Rod. And you want to switch over to the camera? Okay, so that he can demonstrate some of the more. Yep, when I figure out how.
Everything that's on this table here is live. I mean, there can be live. The first hotspots that really kind of came out for DMR.
Hang on. There we go. Now you got it, right?
Okay. Everybody's probably heard the show.
That laptop needs to be closer.
Okay.
Oh, here, I get you.
You got me?
You talk into the camera,
Okay.
and you
All right.
know.
These were the expensive ones. This is one of the early versions of them. These were like, well, what were they, 240 bucks or something? Yeah. And now they have the Shark 2 and the Shark 3, and the Shark 3 is now run $300 and some. To me, they're a waste of money. I mean, they're nice, but why do you want to spend that kind of money when you can do something like this that'll do the same thing for about 50, 60 bucks? This one is a pocket one. I can literally take this one and stick it in my pocket and walk around in a park or whatever and talk on DMR or whatever, and have total communication with the world while I'm just out and about.
No, that's got a built-in battery.
Yeah, it's got a built-in battery. This one, I'm going to show you real quick. I have one of them turned on. I'm going to connect up to 91, which is the World Wide Web, and see if we got some people on there.
And Alpha 41, Lima Uniform.
Okay, this guy is
Any
in.
other check-ins from the Middle East, please come down.
Oh, okay, it's a net going right now. See, you can hear some of it that's going on.
Alpha 41, Juliet Lima. Alpha 41.
He's in Oman.
Zulu.
So you could do this while you're just
Mike.
Germany. So this is almost like it was set up for it today. So
Moscow,
Kuwait.
Thank you.
And by the way, you just pass this radio around as they're checking in. You can see the call sign. So that gives you a rough idea. I also have a D-Star one too, and I can actually communicate the DMR to D-Star through this. And I can also bring up different, I know we're not talking about D-Star today, but let me just connect to 30 Charlie. So it just told me I linked up to 30 Charlie. Now, if I want to talk to somebody else in the world on D-Star, I can do that too at the same time. And this is one that I built that has a Pi 3 on it. I just for the heck of it. I built, I don't know how many of these things, probably over 100 now. And I probably have helped several hundred people either build them or tune them or whatever. And throughout the week, I'm always helping somebody in another country or in the United States. Program went up. Or a lot of people don't want to deal with these things. But they want to get on the air. And Darrell and I both have spent a lot of time helping people, and more than glad to help people if they ever want to get on the air and start doing some of this stuff. Help them get started. Show them how to use the software. Now, what's happening here? Let me show you real quick on this.
Put it in front of the camera. Let's get it running.
Let me go to the. Okay.
No, don't show us.
I'll put it in front of the camera. All right. Right on here right now, as people are coming across on that net, all their calls are being displayed right on this tablet here, which is linked to my hotspot. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah.
Here, hang on. Oh, no, it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. I wanted to share his camera on here.
Oh, if you're logged in, you can see it.
I can see it, but I wanted to put it up here.
Can you see all the calls coming across?
Here, we can do that. There you go.
That's better?
Yeah, you see it right there.
So you can have a dashboard on your tablet, on your phone, on a PC, anything you want. And as calls and things are starting to come across, you can watch it all go live across your device. And if you click on any one of these, let me click on one, I just did. It'll come up and tell me who that guy is, where he's at. He's in the United States in Memphis, Tennessee. And so there's a lot of power inside of DMR that you can see different things that are going on as they're happening. And it's part of the fun sitting there when you see somebody coming in from another part of the world that you click on their call and it'll tell you everything about it.
Yeah, Rod, step in front of the camera and you can see yourself on the screen.
I don't want to see myself.
You want to see
Anyway, bottom line is there's a lot of possibilities, a lot of ways you can go. You can build your own, you can buy your own, you can have somebody help you build one, whatever you want to do. But DMR is a lot of fun, and radios are cheap. There are radios you can buy on the market. Volfung has a whole bunch of inexpensive ones. I've seen them as cheap as $35. So it's the entry level capability of this from the money perspective is very inexpensive. Oh yeah, you can do, like, by the way, these that are on the air right now are connected to this. It's in my pocket. It's just a little jetpack. And I have in my car, I have a commercial router. And the only reason I do that because of the heat of the car, and plus I have multiple hotspots running in the car, and I got other things running in there. And so I use commercial stuff for that. But you don't have to. You don't have to spend that kind of money. I probably spend way more money than I need to do this stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Oh yeah, well you could do you could do Echo Link or something like that, or Droid Star or whatever. Yeah, you can do that stuff. But part of the fun is us hams like to have something with a rubber duck on it, and it just feels good. It seems to be right. But anyway, any questions? Yeah, Bill.
To the gentleman's point, when we get the enhancement, one of the first things, of course, is how much do I have to spend for my antenna, for my radio, for my power supply, for my waiver, and the initial response is, well, that's more money. Now I've got the DMR radio, I've got pull up the cell phone, you program the nickel link, and you look at it. And that, frankly, I mean, nickel link is another digital. If I have a way, if I'm on north somewhere, at 8 o'clock, I just go into Echo Link on my cell phone, and plug into the net. And it's almost the same with any of these DMR things, the concept is the same. It's really not that much more difficult. There's much more flexibility and capability in the DMR than in the Echo Link. Well, the Echo Link's been around for, I don't know, 20 years.
Yeah,
It's a long time.
yeah.
And technology is really advanced since that
But
time.
typically what you'll find is Echolink is mostly connected to FM repeaters.
There's so much more capability and possibility, but there's more than that.
Now, we have a mixed mode repeater. Okay, these hotspots will do all the modes simultaneously, but only one at a time. Okay, so you can turn on 3 modes, but whoever keys up first wins. Okay, so you can buy one hotspot, put it on your favorite DMR channel, put it on your favorite D-Star channel, right? They all share one frequency, if I remember right. But there are different modes coming out. So he can have his, his 51 and his DMR radio listening, and whichever talker comes out first is the one that's going to win, and you can listen to it, right? And then 20 seconds later, it'll switch back to listening to all of them. So if you're listening to, a couple of different quiet groups, you can use one hotspot and listen to that. Our repeater is set up like that, where it's DMR sometimes and D-Star sometimes. But I'll tell you, when we go through the logs, in our area, it's more D-Star. Now, the reason behind it is DMR is easier, cheaper, but the county, way before us, 15 years ago, put in grants for D-Star repeaters and D-Star radios. And everybody, all our old timers, have D-Star in their cars because they wrote grants for Oakland, Shiawassee, Ingham, Livingston, and they bought D-Star repeaters for everybody and D-Star radios for all the EOCs. So that's why we're heavy on D-Star. But if we weren't, all the newcomers are buying DMR, right? Because that's where it's a cheaper radio to buy. It's not hard to set up once you learn it. So it's kind of by us, it's a wash. But if you don't have anything, DMR is the way to go. It really is.
Well, a good example, this radio is an 8051 by ICOM. It's, I don't know what they're going for, about 350, 360.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is a high-end DMR radio. I mean, considered high-end. $180 I paid for this, which came with multiple batteries and it came with more accessories than this did. And so this is a fraction of the cost of this, but if you, go ahead, Bill. Well, so this, if you accessorize this the same way this would come standard, you'd be up close to $500.
What are all the modes on the 6.8?
The 6.8 is on.
It's really only FM.
I know, but what I'm saying is.
It's got DMR tied to it. All-Star.
D-Star, All-Star.
No D-Star.
No D-Star.
DMR, All-Star, and Echo Link.
Echo.
Yeah.
So there's 3 modes right there that you can use right on one repeater.
Well, they have the same. You have Echo Link and All-Star, right? You just don't have DMR. Right, which,
Wires X also.
yeah, and well, wires X when he goes home and turns it back on. Theoretically.
No.
But yeah, so I mean, you have everything we have, except for the DMR aspect, and that's not really hard to hook up. So.
Now, if I key up on my DMR radio, I'm going to go through our 311.887 right now, which is our other talk group. It's going to come out on the D-Star side as well as DMR. So it just told me that I just kerchumped. So.
But we have a D-Star DMR translator on one of our talk groups, but not on the one with the FM repeater. We found that trying to take D-Star and translate it to FM sucked. We had it running for a while and everybody's like, this sucks, shut it off. And I agree.
A couple of times when we checked in on the net, we've got guys on FM, both on Echo Link, and also.
There, that's all FM.
Yeah, but I'm saying, we had 3 different networks being used.
Well, you had some with DMR too on occasion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I come in DMR
So
usually.
it happens just at any given time, and you don't know where they're coming from.
No, you don't.
Unless somebody announces on Echolink, on All-Star, or on DMR.
So I know you guys want to close.
Well, I wanted to add something. One of the things that I found very useful, very helpful, is that there are about 5 people that I know of in our club that have DMR.
Okay.
And they also have their own hotspots. One of the things you can do is go hotspot to hotspot, private conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And if
No, we didn't get into that.
I wanted people to know that
Yes.
that's a nice added feature.
Yeah, so it was a learning curve for us too, okay? One of the things that we learned is we thought when we first got into DMR, right? I travel every week somewhere. Rod's at home. Rod, let's meet on 310. Oh, it's busy. Let's meet on 311. Okay, well, it only goes to 319, right? Let's meet on 321 and see what happens. Well, we're the only 2 there because 321's never been assigned to anybody.
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean you can't use it, right? Let's meet on 1,000,000 and see what happens. Put in 1,000,000. Hey, we're talking to each other. The servers don't care, right? And the cool thing about DMR, which we didn't talk about, is we can text each other. As long as we're monitoring the same talk group, I can send text through the keyboard and he gets them. So you can send text messages over your repeater to each other, right? So that's all possible because it just relays the text as digital voice.
There's another feature in DMR too that we haven't talked about. We don't really use it. We talk about talk groups, and all those talk groups that we talk about are group calls. However, there's a private group that you can do, a private call. And so I can basically call his radio directly. And if he has alerts turned on in there, he'll get an alert, like a ring like a phone, and be able to come back to me.
Right, so I could be listening to 91 and he'll chunk my private call and my radio will ring telling me to switch over to whatever group he was on, which would be his which would be his ID.
Right.
And then we would just talk on his ID, right? But it would ring and tell you, hey, switch. Now, it says it's private, but anybody that puts their radio in group mode and goes to that,
They could hear.
listen to it, right? So you just got to know it's there. But, if you're stalking somebody, it's not too hard to put your radio in group mode and put it on their ID and you can listen to them all day long, no matter who they talk to. Because it's not really, nothing's private, it's amateur radio.
Now, one of the things with these radios that I know some people are doing, but it's illegal, is they're actually using the encryption feature that's in it. They have AES encryption. And if you have a BTEC 6x2 and he has a BTEC 6x2, we can actually encrypt our conversations back and forth. It's illegal on the ham bands to do that, but it has the ability to do that in there. So if you want to use it on the commercial side, it does work. Do they?
We run into a lot of encrypted voice and I don't know why. And maybe it is because they're.
It could be.
It could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a tough cipher to break. So
Yeah, I have no interest.
I've never used it.
I got enough problems trying to talk next door, let alone encrypt to talk to somebody. Any other DMR questions? Yeah. So do we have problems with the mixed mode repeater with analog users complaining about the digital noise? So we encourage anybody that is going to use it on analog to make sure they have their CT/CSS turned on a receiver so they never hear the digital noise. Now, our repeater is built in such a way because it was an FM repeater. The wireline card that we're using to interface inside the Motorola, if you key up on FM, it actually disconnects the power to the digital top hat. So FM rules all, because in case of emergency, it's backup, right? We all go FM because at the end of the day, FM is the only thing that's going to be alive anyways. So the digital will shut down if you key up on FM. But we also discourage people from using that one for FM because we've got 3 other FM repeaters. Use something else.
We probably have less than 1% of the traffic on our repeater as FM. The rest is all digital.
On the multi-mode,
On our multi-mode. The 6.8 is all FM, period.
right? But we analog,
Analog,
yes.
yeah.
But because we already have, we have access to a water tower and we put up a FM only repeater. It's right next to our other repeater and it's the same footprint, right? So if you want to go 440 FM, we have an FM repeater. If you want to go 440 digital, we have a mixed mode repeater. And then we have the 2-meter FM repeater.
Then we have a fourth repeater we haven't put up yet.
And we have a fourth one that it's always broke. No matter what we do, it's still broke.
We actually broke the cans.
So Steve's got them right now. He's actually fixing the cans for us. So I wanted to show you something before we quit, but I got to get the mouse over here and get off the screen. Just real quick. Slideshow, continue from here. And then we want to, am I still in the Zoom? How do I share this now? So I want to share this screen. And if you're interested in, if you're going to go out and buy radios, these are the radios we like, okay? From the least expensive to the most expensive. You should be able to get an MD380, like I'm holding in my hand, at a swap for 40 bucks. New, they're 60. But everybody's got one at a swap, okay? We've got one of our guys, if you know Jason, W8JMB, he's bought every one he's ever run across. He's got them in his woodshed, one on each log, all the way across. He's got them everywhere, right? But these are the radios that we like. This is really a rock solid radio. It's only 440. The next one down, the UV380, you can't tell the difference between this one and the UV380 other than it's dual band. And you should be able to pick up those used all day long for about $70. Okay. Now, both of these don't have the database capability without hacking them. The guy who hacked the firmware to allow the database in, his name was Travis Godspeed. He's all over the internet. He was able to hack the firmware, figure out how to put the database in, make it work. Then he turned over all the code to TYT and said, hey, this is what I figured out. Can you do this for us so that we don't have to keep hacking your radios? They said yes. So TYT now has released official firmware that allows the database to go in. Okay. At the same time, his website and all his code got hacked and it disappeared off the internet. He put up a note saying that all my hard work is gone. Somebody took it all and I'm no longer interested in helping anymore. But since then, TYT has stepped up and fixed that problem. The Bofang RD5R, we bought 5 of these. They're the little ones. They look like UV5R, right? They last forever and they actually worked real well. And they were the only TDMA radio that Bofang made. Bofang released 4 DMR radios. 3 of them were failures. One of them was TDMA and actually worked right. And that was this one. So if you run across them, they're hard. They're like unicorns right now. They're hard to find, but they were cheap, right? We bought a 5-pack and I think we paid $55 a piece for them. And they were actually very nice and the batteries lasted forever. The ones that Rod and I have is this BTEC 6x2. Rod has, how many you have? I have 2, Les has 2, Jim has 2, Bruce has 2. We've got a bunch.
They've been bulletproof.
And they've been really good. One screen failure, Amazon took it back and replaced it. Okay, you order from Amazon, it was like 180 bucks, you get 2 batteries. I think they've gone up in price now. Again, politics, tariffs, and all this, they're at like 210. Okay, if money's no object, the 878 is the way to go. 878 has a Bluetooth board in it, so you can get a remote push to talk. You have one?
They have the plus.
No, this is the, not the version 2, but multiple database. Newest one mobile.
Yeah, it's got more memory.
No.
Right. So the 878, the 868, and the 6x2 all look the same. Right. What's that?
Program.
Oh, yeah. So the orange button turned green. Right. Right. So, but this one has Bluetooth, which is nice if you're trying to do stuff like we do a lot of parades, right? We do a lot of cert work. The way we get access to our repeater towers is we trade it for volunteer time, right? We do the parades, we do the Balloon Fest, we do stuff like that, and that keeps us in with emergency management. But when you're out in the field doing that, having a Bluetooth headset is a huge plus. He's got one on his ear right there. Right. So the 6x2 doesn't have that. You have to use a wired one, or you have to come up with a Bluetooth interface somehow. But this has got it all built in, and it's for the money difference. If you're buying a new radio, the 878 is the way to go.
The 878, the high-end one, I think they're pushing $400 right now.
I saw the new for carrying 300, and the slightly older model is the one passing around for about 200.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it's the same price as this.
Price on them.
So that's what I had. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. For people who are interested in the T by T, anybody that knows Scott Adams, AC8IL.
Yep.
He's got a business and he sells TYTs, and if you're a ham radio operator, you get them at a better price than.
Yeah. So yeah, Scott Adams is a good source. We've always used main trading company for him, Richard. When you're down at Dayton, if you offer them cash, the price comes way down. It's almost half. You know, we were camping there, so I happened to be walking to the bathroom before the swap opened on Friday, and he had a stack of these, and I said, "Hey, how much for the radio, man?" And he goes, "You got cash, $60." And I got on the radio and told everybody that was volunteering that was there, because a bunch of our guys volunteer there. We all bought them before the swap ever opened.
It's 2 minutes before we're supposed to be out of this room. So I'm sure there are lots more questions, but hopefully this has been a good presentation. I think it's been great.
Well, there's a lot to cover in a very short amount of time.
Thank you. Sorry it was so long. I do apologize.